So welcome to this special podcast, which is an international podcast. I think this is the first time we've ever done this on Boss TV. We've got Das here in London. Bhai Gurpreet Singh Ji, are you in Bradford or are you Birmingham right now?
I'm in Leeds.
Okay, you're in Leeds. And we've got Bhai Moninder Singh Ji, who is based in Canada right now. I'm guessing on the BC sides.
Yep, in good old Surrey, BC.
So thank you so much for joining us today. And the topic we're going to be discussing today is quite a prominent one, something that's quite, you could say, quite hot in the news, but it's something that's been going on for a very long time and it's been building up. And thankfully today, you've been able to get yourself on this podcast as well, Bhai Moninder Singh Ji. Just before we start, just to do a very simple introduction, it would be nice if you guys can explain a little bit more about the Seva, the different Seva that you guys are doing. Just Bhai Moninder Singh Ji, representing Khalistan Centre in BC, and I'm sure you're involved in many other types of Seva, spokesman as well for different Gurdwara sides or specific Gurdwara sides in BC. And we've got Bhai Gurpreet Singh Ji from Saving Punjab as well. We did a podcast with Bhai Sahib Ji at the start of the year as well. So make sure you check out Saving Punjab, and we've got more podcasts coming in the future. But Bhai Moninder Singh Ji, can you please just give an introduction to yourself and what Seva you're involved in?
Yeah, for the last 25 years or so, although it may not look like it, I've been involved in various different Sevas in the Panth. We started out with Sikh Gurmat camps. I used to do whatever Gyan Jam Maharaj ne bakshiya, like as in lectures, speeches. I started that when I was about 17 or 18 years old, and attending camps and actually lecturing there. And then Otto Ga Gurdwara ni Seva jehdi hai och lad ke assi aaye, so we fought our way into Gurdwara, like physically. And basically that was where our Gurdwara Seva started, and it was to build Kendra centers, starting Gurmat academies in this very area, doing more prachar, our goal was to kind of break Gurdwara youth centered. It's a slow inch by inch process, but it's been going well over the last 15, 20 years, where there's a lot more services available for youth. Gyms have been built, we're moving towards community centers now. So there's a lot of work that was done there. On the Sangaj side, mainly with the Sikh Sangaj for Khalistan, most of the prachar that I was involved in over the last 15, 17 years, from the UK, Australia, all over the United States, Canada, I've been traveling around a lot, doing that type of work where it's gathering youth, connecting them has been one of the bigger things for me, is to make sure that there's a connectivity between youth in Australia, UK, Canada, US. So we're not duplicating work, we're sharing resources, we're sharing Jada Gyan Maharaj ne bakshiya, we're sharing in that as well, doing vichara instead of debates, and trying to kind of link ourselves in that way. So lately we've been working through the Khalistan Centre and Panth Punjab project for that. We put out articles, magazines, do education sessions, seminars, and basically that's where primarily that Seva has been, through the Gurdwara system and through these organizations.
Thank you so much, Ji. And Bhai Gurpreet Singh Ji, just an introduction from yourself as well, please.
Anji, obviously not as extravagant as Bhai Moninder Singh, but Das is just a Sevadar at Saving Punjab, a research-based educational organization looking to conduct primary and secondary research on the ground in Punjab to understand the grassroots of the issue, so that we can then start implementing long-term sustainable solutions to make Punjab great again, and highlight the fact that these issues that are going on in Punjab, they didn't just happen overnight. I think the underlying, we all understand the issues within Punjab are systematic, and they're a part of a long, we could say, planning to bring destruction to Punjab.
Right. Thank you so much. And again, like I said earlier, you can check out our first video with Bhai Gurpreet Singh Ji, giving an overview to what is Saving Punjab. And just moving on, just giving some context to this podcast as well, because I think the aim of this, because Bhai Moninder Singh Ji, you've done a lot of podcasts in the past, or just talks and so on. And there's definitely an audience out there that is following this, that has got a lot of education on this and so on. But what we wanted to do with this podcast was start from the bottom, start from the foundations, and especially for loads of those Sikhs out there that are living in the diaspora, that have a basic knowledge of Sikhi, go to the Gurdwara Sahib on a Sunday. But when it comes to these topics that we could say are more political, they have no understanding at all. So just if you can just break it down, make it very simple, my beinti to you guys, because I know this is stuff you talk about every single day, even things like the word Sangarish and so on, even these terminologies, can we just please translate them just for the armed Sikh? Like, what is this terminology? And for the armed Sikh that listen to it, you could say the basis of Sikhi followers, those that have a basic knowledge of Sikhi, what is the current situation in the Sikh Panth, whether that's in, obviously it's more focused on Canada, where we've got India, but you can say in the diaspora, what is the current situation right now, and why should the Sikhs care about this?
Yes,
Bhai Moninder Singh Ji. Anji, sorry about that.
I think if we center this discussion around Jesse, so whatever we're going to say today is centered around that Guru Sahib Ang Sangya, that the Guru Sahib is around us at all times. So we only speak in a way that Guru Sahib nu jehdi gal paundi hai, that as in the Guru would accept it. That takes away from fear and doubt, that we don't mince our words, we don't choose our words, that we're not compromising the discussion by fear kind of seeping in. And a lot of times that happens. That's a regular thing within the Panth, because we have been for the last 40 years or so, especially moving through a space of trauma. We're moving through a space of like genocide, rape, murder, torture of our people. So it's difficult to have these conversations very truthfully. And then when we're out in the West, it becomes a little bit different, because here there's different laws. There's so much you can say. And then there's a clash of two worlds that happens between us as Sikhs. And if we were free, if we were able to kind of say whatever we wanted to, we could speak on Sikh terms. But now when we have to talk about things like armed struggle, for example, we get very, very careful in our choice of words. But that carefulness doesn't come from being a Sikh. If it comes from being a UK citizen, a Canadian citizen, or an American citizen, because we have to kind of live and exist within these spaces right now. So that I want to kind of just center around that as in like, so we have to start here. Guru Sahib says, Gursikhi ho karni, Gur farmai, Gursikha karna. That's Bhai Gurdas Ji ne kiya saga. That Gursikhi to ek India, Gursikhi says this, that whatever the Guru says, Gur farmai, whatever the Guru says, Gursikh ne karna. That means very little in the line of questioning Guru Sahib. And when Guru Sahib says, like, and Guru de jade bol bal leya, Guru Panth de bol bal leya, so whatever the Guru Granth or the Guru Panth says, like Raj karega Khalsa. And we say this, and we almost leave it as a slogan. So when we were talking about this subject in particular, like as in when you were saying earlier, Sukhdeep Singh, that some of our listeners that might be on today, that they're not all as aligned to the political side as they might be to the more dharmic or religious side, that we often use this terminology. Technically within Sikhi, these things don't exist. The Miri Siddhant or Sant Sipahi Siddhant, these are like two sides of the same coin. One can't exist without the other. So I think what we've seen is that a lot of people tend to lean towards one side or the other without a full understanding of what the complete package is. And both in those cases, like your siyasat or your politics has to be led by dharma, righteousness. Otherwise, it doesn't work. You become zalim, or you become like an oppressor at that point. So I think that's very important for people to understand in this conversation. Why it's important right now at the spot where we stand, like you were saying, that where are we today, whether it's in Punjab or in the diaspora. My feeling is that where we're standing right now is at a crossroad, that we've been at this crossroad for quite some time. It's becoming more and more apparent of what our standing is within the world. The fight that we thought was limited to Punjab. For 40 years, we heard that this fight, if you were in Punjab and you raised your voice, if you were in Punjab and you spoke out against the government, if you were in Punjab and you fought for human rights or any type of political rights there, then the outcome of that could be that you were thrown in jail, you were tortured, your family was harassed, you were murdered or made to disappear, like in the cases of like Bhai Jaswant Singh Kalra or others. That it was a reality that wasn't for us as Naujawans out in the diaspora communities that we live in. What's changed with Bhai Avtar Singh Khanda and with Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar is that Shaheedi are now being demanded in the West. And I'm saying Shaheedi being demanded because this is the reality of the movement now. We don't run from Shaheedi. We don't go and jump into the flames either. But whatever path or marg that Guru Sahib has given us, on that path, if there's that ag or that fire, we readily walk through it as well. Just like our Buzurgs did, Baba Deep Singh, Bhai Taru Singh, Bhai Mani Singh. They didn't dole or they didn't give up in those moments. So I think what's happening in the reality of where we're standing right now is that there's a geopolitical game going on, and we're a piece of that. We're not the biggest player in that, but there's other countries that play right now. Like you can see what Canada did, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. But Canada's declaration this week, it can't be thought that Canada is so ethically and morally correct and their compass is working all of a sudden that they were going to make this statement. There's something bigger going on when the United States starts backing them, Australia starts backing them, these allies start backing them. And a lot of it has to do with what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. India's relationship with Russia, the US trying to weaken that relationship, Canada having a smoking gun that they found, and they have found something with India's interference into this political assassination. So I think these are things that Sikhs as Naujawans have to start paying attention to. So when you said earlier that a lot of our listeners here may not have that thinking, I think that's the other side of the coin that they have to work on. And it's very important because all the gyan we get from Maharaj, all the Simran we do, all the abhyas we do, all the Gurbani, khoj karde hain, vichar karde hain, all of that we're undertaking, when we go into Sangat, it's supposed to strengthen us for moments where we become active on that meaty side of the coin. And that activity then is guided by that meaty effort and abhyas that we've done. So I think is the issue. There's a lot going on right now, but I think up to the Naujawans in each of these countries, the fight, that the fight has come to your door now. Now what will you do? And running and hiding has never been an option for us. So that means that door is about to be kicked open by the oppressor. And now do we stand and fight? And how do we fight? Not everything is always like fighting physically. How do we use our words? How do we use our pen? How do we use our sangat? How do we use the strength from Guru Sahib? How do we use Gurbani? How do we use, eventually, Shastras? All of those are at play for us. So I think I'll leave it there. But I think there's a lot going on right now, and engagement is the biggest thing. The Santaji ne gal kahi sigi, Sanjana Singh Ji Khalsa Pindrawale, during right before the attack on Darbar Sahib, he had a line that was very important, I think, in Sikh history, and I think it's a value is always going to be there for the Panth, and that was that hum kamar kasa karo, but sirf kamar kasa nahi karna, kamar kasa karke toro. That as in, like, be prepared now, get prepared for the fight that's coming, but don't just get prepared and start moving. Because you have to start moving in this movement. Otherwise, it becomes like a standstill. And the standstill or the status quo is the worst thing because people get comfortable.
Thank you, Bhai Gurpreet Singh Ji. Any thoughts on that as well? Anything you like to add?
Absolutely. There's so many things that Bhai Sahib said that I can absolutely relate to. One point I just want to make quickly there. I mean, Bhai Sahib, you said that this, kind of door is going to be kicked open. But looking at the kind of what's been going on in the last, I'd say, 30 years minimum, I think they changed the tactics from covert, from overt to covert, and then back now to overt again. So, I mean, there's been a silent genocide in the last 40 years. Looking at the statistics, there's probably been more people that have died from the cancer, the pesticides, and the water contamination in the ground, the health issues, and the drug pandemic. And many other kind of ways they have caused this genocide in Punjab. Now that they're doing it kind of overtly again in the West, I think it's waking people up again. There's a shabad that came to mind with some of the things that you said, that, we as a Qawm, we have a duty to Miri and Piri. Khalsa is the whole package to Miri and Piri. And in terms of, like, there's many shabds in Gurbani that Guru Sahib says to us that we've got a duty to society, like Santa Mamno Dano Ekatwari Meri. Omara says Jakar Kia Tarmiaka Papi go down to. We've got this actual duty, not just to our own Bhakti, our Jivan, our Naam Simran. We as Khalsa and Sikh had a duty to clear and cleanse evil and uproot it from the world. And there's the shabad that, I mean, I asked to go Sikh once in terms of Raj. How do we as Sikh get our Raj? And he said to me that to get a Raj and to get Khalsa Raj, we have to become Khalsa. And he quoted a shabad which is a Hasti Sir Jo Ankas Hai, Eherin Jion Sir De. And he basically talks about an Eherin Hasti Sir Jo Ankas. Ankas is like a little hook. And he talked about this little tiny hook. It controls the whole elephant. And he says that whenever the hook's put down, it controls which way the elephant goes. And he says, look how much power this small little hook has. But to make that hook, the Ankus had to give his head to the Aaron. So he had to give his head to the Aaron to make that. And Mara says, it says, Manatan aage rakh ke ubi save kare. So for us to get to that point, we have to also put our Manatan in front of Guru Sahib. And says, "E Gurmukh aap nivariye sab raj srishta kale." When we get rid of ourselves, become Khalsa, focus on our bhakti, then we become like that Ehrin and the Ankus, and the Ankus then can control, and the Raj comes automatically. So I'm going to come on to like a question that I think you kind of touched upon, but I just want to know a little bit more detail, Paisab. In terms of the tensions now between Canada and India, it's huge. The first kind of point I want to bring in, I mean, the Qawm, from my small experience, I see these things come in waves, whether it was Rajwana, whether it was, Gurbakh Singh, whether it was like this, Bargadi Morcha. And then what happens is this wave comes, everyone wakes up, and people nabah their duty at the time. And then what happens, even happened to the Kisan Morcha, straight after, like, everyone just forgets and goes to their normal 9 to 5 and gets on with their lives. And we've got people that, start up these organizations and they struggle and they stay in that. I'm going to give you one prime example. Bhai Gurpreet Singh. He's currently sitting in jail at the moment. And, we as a Qawm have practically just forgotten that, like, he's in this jail, and the next wave has now come, and the attention's all on what happened with Shaheed Bhai Nijjar Singh and Khanda, and what happened in terms of in the diaspora. But as in, what do we do, as in, especially with the Amrapal situation, how do we keep the fire alive for those people that have done something and then they end up in jail? Especially we've got political prisoners in jail at the moment. How do we keep that attention alive and not let things die out?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm going to preface it with a small thing that I sometimes use when I do my kind of talks. You guys have a very famous writer, C.S. Lewis. He wrote a lot. He had a really interesting quote once about a short story about two devils talking to one another. And one devil is asking the other devil, because he comes from a very Judeo-Christian background, Lewis does, with his writing. But he asked this question about, he asked this conversation about two devils speaking to one another. And one devil says to the other devil, like, how do we get these people? Like, how do we control them? Like, as in, like, what do we need to do? What's the plan? Like, basically, what's the plan? And the other devil laughs and says, the plan is very simple. And he goes, create so much noise in the world that these people can't hear the voice of their God anymore. And if you look at what's happening in the world today, social media has become that noise. That people actually have limited their seva, what they refer to as seva, as likes and posts. That doing seva with your body, your mind, your resources is not even a thing anymore. Everything is social media. That if you said something on social media, you can pat yourself on the back and get a good night's sleep. And I think this idea of how sustainable structures are no longer around. We expect like the Akal Takht Sahib or the Shomani Committee, and then we expect these structures that have been around in the Panth for at least 100 years or even like 400 years in the case of like Akal Takht Sahib, that we want those structures to do something. Those structures are compromised by the management there. The structures are the structures. Or the structure, like as in Akal Takht Sahib or like a Gurdwara is not evil inherently. The Bande that are there though primarily are though. So we can't really get anything from there. So when we talk about anything that the Panth is doing right now when it comes to Bhai Gurpreet Singh or Bandi Singh, these morche that are going on, I think if you look throughout Sikh history though, all of these things come in waves, right? But there's an underlying sangarish that is very clear, like as in like Raj Digal, Pachai Dave Digal, right? Like as in that was in the 1700s is a prime example. That daur of Sikhi or that period of Sikhi has so much Qurbani in it. There was a Shaheed Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar and a Shaheed Bhai Avtar Singh Khanda 5 times a day in that time. When we were forced into the jungles, when we were living on horseback, our Matawa and Perna, like as in like our mothers and daughters and sisters were in Mir Manu's prisons, like as in like everything seemed like it was lost at that time. Every day it seemed like these Shaheediyan were happening more and more. And the reality there was that the focus didn't change. The focus wasn't on any type of right or human right or civil right. The focus was Raj. कि राज लेना है छोटे कल्लू करे तो बाद like after the lesser Holocaust, the smaller Holocaust that Sikhs went through with Lakhpat Rai, there was a gurmata that was done in Odi Galjadiya that it's actually translated in Pant Prakash, Jo nikas jahe raj lehe mare gurpur jaye. That utte gurmata hoya si, that Sikhs jada gurmata ardas ਕੀਤੀ and then gurmata ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੁਣ ਨਿਕਲ ਗਿਆ, whoever got out of this, jo nikas jahe, whoever got out of this kera, whoever survived, Raj Lahed, that they only have one job now, कि Raj लेना, to bring Raj to the Khalsa Panth. मरे गुरु पर जाए, जेरे मर गए या शहीद हो गए, वो तो Guru Sahib तो गए. Like as they've already gone to Guru Sahib, those that didn't survive. And it's like that type of clarity exists. No, now the difference between us and our Jarvana right now, or the oppressor right now in the form of the Indian state, is they are very, very clear on what they want to do. They want the destruction of Sikhi through the destruction of Punjab. If Punjab doesn't exist, like Sikhi will exist in some form, but it's lost a lot of it. To us, if Sikhi doesn't exist, Punjab is finished as well. Like as in like Punjab wasta Quran de naate. That Punjab flourishes on the name of the Gurus. And that's what it's known for. So in my opinion, like as in we don't have sustainable structure. We don't give enough energy, time, resources to structure building as much as we do to emotional responses when these moments come up. And then that's why things die out. I think you see this peak, it goes like this, and then we see this. And in this downfall is mayusi and depression. That nothing happened again, nothing happened again. Oh, we did so much, and then when you look at what did we actually do? And this is a question, I think, for Najwans not only in the West, but across the entire world, including myself, is that what are we actually trying to do? We're in a mode right now, I always feel that asik bacha de vich survival. Right? And when you're in survival, you're being hunted. You're not the hunter anymore. That you actually become in this hunted thing. And like we have our purkhe that said to us that Sikhi saath na bahi saas. Bhai Taru Singh when Bhai Taru Singh Shaheedi was happening, the ardas was that Sikhi saath na bahi saas. That not save me, that I want to live. कि Sikhi jehdi is Sikhi ke swasa sang is zindagi nib jawe. That I actually live up to what the Guru's ideals are, even if I die. And that even in the same line of thinking was brought forward for Baba Gurbakh Singh Shaheed almost like 40 years later. Like there's a line in Panth Prakash, ke har mandar ke hajur im khadi khari ardas satgur Sikhi sang rave sees ke san ke saas. Like as in Baba Gurbakh Singh Shaheedi was the same. These Singha ne, like as in the ones that fought at that site, the idea wasn't to survive, because survival or life is pointless without actually Sikhi nu samarpit hona. So these ideas, I think, are missing in revolution or Sangharsh. We said Sangharsh before. Sangharsh can be a combination of either revolution or struggle, depending on which context it's used in. But the struggle is beautiful. Like we get life out of the struggle. And Sangharsh is our entire. Tusi Sangharsh karna, tusi apne naal kaam karo, lobh moh hankar. There's an internal struggle going on as well. That you have to cleanse yourself of that. And then there's an external struggle, jehda gareeb di rakhya, jarwane di pakya. That the Sikh Kanu Sadant imide that we've been given this order by the Guru Granth and Guru Panth, that gareeb di rakhya karni, that those that are weak and oppressed, that we protect them, jarwane di pakya, and we destroy the oppressor. The clarity in that is simple. But the unfortunate thing is that when we look around, especially in the West, most of our so-called Sangharsh today is pandering to Western politicians. Lining ourselves closer and closer to Western governments that are oppressors themselves in one way or another. So if we want to give our arm over to the Western governments, then my opinion is that that you have to take your arm away from the Guru in order to give it to them. Playing this middle role that they are be all end all. Now we can leverage them, we can utilize them, we can pressure them into movement in a certain direction, but that's political diplomacy. Guru Sahib even did that. Sikhs did that in the 1700s. It doesn't mean we bend the knee to them. And what we see as so-called lobbying and diplomacy is bending the knee and compromising Sikh Sadans to do so. And Najwans need to be aware of that.
Just to come in there quickly, because I think it's really important that some of the viewers, there's some viewpoints out there, and I just want to ask you what your viewpoint and some of these views are. some people say that, when you said the Sangarsh is with Kaam Krolo Mankar, with our own Jeevan, some would argue that, until we've battled our Kaam Krolo Mankar, our 5 evils, and until we've, battled the Rajai and can wake up Amrit Vela, until we've practiced our spirituality, then there's no point in engaging in any type of Sangarsh or activism or, in looking on that side. So what would your answer be to them? Because this is something that is quite common within many Panthic organizations, groups, Jathe at the moment, where, the emphasis is on focus on your Bhagati. When your Bhagati is at a level, then you can start talking about Sangarsh. And the second question to you was, in terms of, we as a Qawm at the moment, where we're very reactive in what we do. We're not very proactive. We don't think of preventing something, or we don't look at, forward thinking of if tomorrow, we are given the opportunity for our Raj, have we got structure in place? Have we got the, are we in the position at the moment to think that we can, because this is something that comes of them similar type of people, that they will always ask, how are you going to rule? What is your Raj going to look like? And all these things, the same old questions like, oh, you're landlocked, or, how's India going to let you live with your small area? How are you going to, how are you going to do darshan of Gurdwara and Hazur Sahib and other places? So it's just kind of my reason for asking you these questions is because this is probably what's going to be going on in a lot of people's heads. You're talking about this Raj, how can you talk about Raj when we haven't got our Sikhi, to a level yet where we can start talking about a Sangarsh? And even that Raj that you're talking about, as in, is the Qawm like the common thing that you hear all the time is Sikh can't control a Gurdwara without fighting each other. How they're going to control, a country? So like, how would you, and what would you say to them people listening to that right now?
Yeah, I can start with the first one. It's a good question because I get this one a lot too. That as working on yourself, bring yourself to a point where you're ready. And my answer to that is that, well, in that context, you'll never be ready. The eradication of Kaam Karo Lo Mohankar is basically an impossibility. The beauty is in the struggle with them. If Satguru ne if you're fighting with them every single day, ha dolo na, karata na karo. But Kaam Krodh Lobh Mohankar is around us all the time. The test is in the moment. Do we dole? Do we falter? Or do we survive? And we pass things down our daily basis. We see money lying around. Do we pick it up and walk away? We have a chance to steal. We have a chance to commit adultery. We have a chance to do any other type of karata that we're not supposed to be engaging in. The real test is always, do we actually engage or not? And then that's the testing moment for us. But even bigger than that, I would go one step further. If the idea is that we have to be absolutely pure, right? That absolutely all the guna within us have to, and there's no organs left. That's a tough one, because the only place there's no organ is Parmeshwar. Baki sare thaan there is organ hunde, as in to a degree. Unless as in avastha jehdi hai, it can be there, but most people. But then there's something that we have to look back to. But, we have this idea that ek sikh dwe sad sang panji Parmeshwar. When you're alone, tusi ek sikh hain. Do ho jo te sad sangat da roop banna panda hai. Panj aa jo te Parmeshwar da roop ban janda hai. The idea there is, in those panj, there's so many gunas that you'll outweigh the organs by them. So GSC Sangat de roop de vich, Panth de roop de vich. So in a larger collective Panth, if we're moving in a Sangarsh, our gunas are going to be what carry us. When we're doing it in individual jathe, small 2-person, 3-person teams, or even as an individual, Hankar and everything else will weigh much, much heavier. But when you're responsible to 100, 500, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 people, in there's Parmeshwar utte vasta hai. So my idea is that while you have to work on yourself continuously for your entire life, there's no such thing as retirement from the Panth. Na thodi seva mukni hai, na thoda abhyas mukna hai. Right? Even jehde Brahmgani de avastha tak chale jande hai, ja sant ban jande hai, they have those gunas of those qualities of the definition of those. One of the mood ucharan bhi Vaheguru Guru Mantri nakalda hai until their last breaths. ਇਹਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿ it finishes, because ਕਾਮ ਕ੍ਰੋਧ ਲੋਭ ਮੋਹ ਹੰਕਾਰ is waiting to attack at any point. So as a protection for us, like Guru Mantra is there to kind of guide us, in my opinion, and it helps us through those testing moments. But as an individual, it's so much harder. You realize that. ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਕ ਬੰਦਾ ਖੜਾ ਹੋਵੇ, a simple thing, and don't take this the wrong way. If you're wanting to engage in some putte kam, and you have one other Sangh or one other Kaur standing beside you, you can't do it in that moment. Ek ਤਾਂ ਬੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਬੇਇੱਜ਼ਤੀ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ, ਕਿ as in like, oh, they're going to know. But there's a reason for Sangat. There's a reason for the Panth, that the good qualities of the guns that we have, all of those will outweigh the ogans. So I think the first question should be answered that way, is that like as a collective, as a ekta, as Panth, that we can actually move together. You don't have to wait for anything. And if we have to go that way, we look at people like Maharaja Ranjit Singh or Baba Banda Singh Bahadur. We look at the periods of Raj that they established. There was tons of good Sikhs around them. And there was probably tons that weren't the greatest as well. But in that collective form, I feel that as in that was the Panji Parmeshwar, that form that they carried, that Parmeshwar utte vasda si, utte abhyas ho reha si, utte nitnem chal reha si. The primary jada mudra nata hai, wo Guru Granth te Guru Panth de naal si. And I think that is one of the most important things, if we come back to that point at some point, about what that mudra nata should look like, and why that mudra nata has to be Guru Granth and Guru Panth. And the second part of the question about, like, as in the reality of the state, that now the nation-state model is flawed in so many different ways. I have a very complicated answer to this, but my idea is that Khalistan is not the end. Khalistan is the beginning. Raj jada ya Khalse da Raj ya Sarist Raj ya is much beyond that. Jita Bhai Rantir Singh or even Sardar Kapoor Singh or others have talked about, that Khalistan as a nation-state model is just expanding the problem. And the problem is borders, and the problem is divisions, and the problem is like this competition with one another over resources. All of that would continuously make this Kaljug get even worse. So in that kind of idea, as in like, okay, then what do you want Khalistan for? Well, the idea of Khalistan in the modern nation-state model is that it would actually become a beacon of such, that there would be truth there. Our job isn't done with Khalistan. You would almost get into this thing that you would export revolution to other countries around the world. Jithe bhi koi gareeb hai, you would go there and you would fight for them. You would train them. You would fight alongside them. You can do that overtly or covertly. Nations do that all the time. That's why they have intelligence agencies. Ours would just hopefully be for the good of the entire world. And one of the reasons why is people will ask, well, what makes you think that you're so high and mighty? One of the biggest reasons is that we're not a conversionist month. That ਅਸੀਂ ਬਾਹਰੋਂ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਰੋਟੀ ਖਾ ਲਓ, but you have to come to Gurdwara on Sunday. ਅਸੀਂ like ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਾਣੀ ਦੀ ਬੋਤਲ ਦੇਤੀ, ਕੋਈ ਕੱਪੜਾ ਦੇ ਦਿੱਤਾ, we give them clothing, water, shelter. We're not like Christian missionaries that go across Africa with the point of conversion. Seva, as we all know, is that we don't want anything back. If you want something back, it's not seva anymore. Now it's a bartering trade. वो seva ही नहीं रही, in that our expectation is that these people, just because we gave them something, become sick. No. They should want to become sick by looking at how our jivani is, how we exist, and the examples that we set. So that when we say that Sada Raj keho ja hoga, Sada Raj nayara ya, it's vakhara, it's different. It can't be like these models out there, or we just become just like them. And this idea of like landlocked or not, we would have to leverage nation-state models now. And people, they can think whatever they want about that. How's India going to let you exist? Well, you got Pakistan on one side and you got China on the other. Why wouldn't they want you to exist? You become now a strategic spot for many, many countries. They want you to flourish. They want to secure your borders. What happened to Israel? How did Israel exist? Well, how's Israel existing from the 1940s up until now? Because it was a strategic spot for the United States to counter the Arab world. Just like Punjab would be a strategic space in the world for other countries to counter India's growing influence. This is natural geopolitics. And that's why you would survive. And I will go one step further than that. Even if that didn't happen, Sawal then that becomes is that what is the Qeemat of Azadi then? Like if you could be a well-off slave versus a Gareeb Azad individual, which one would you choose? And that's the question for the Panth. And I'll give you one small example and I'll stop here, is that there's a short story from like the days of like the black slavery like in the 400 years in the United States. There's a short story there about that Malcolm X used to tell about the house Negro versus the field Negro, and the difference in thinking that they had. The house Negro was kept in the house by the master, by the white man, and he was fed off the master's plate. He was allowed to sleep in the master's house, downstairs in the basement, away. He got all the master's old clothes that were pate putte hai, but he still got clothes. So he became, in his mind, an extension of the master. And he would even use terminology like that, like as if the boss was sick, or like as in the master was sick. He would say, "We sick," and he would actually use it as in like he was an extension. The field Negro lived out in the fields. They were beaten, they were bruised, and the difference between the two was the field Negro only had one thought: "Main azad hona hai," right? The house Negro's thing was that I need status quo, that this is a good life. So when the field Negro goes to the house Negro to say, "Let's run away. Let's run away from this life of slavery. Let's run away from and gain our freedom," and the house Negro's response is, "You're crazy. That where are you going to get food like this? Where are you going to get kapde like this? Where are you going to get a home like this?" And then the last thing that they'll say is, "Where are you going to get a master like this?" Those that have bought into that idea of slavery, that they need perfection before they'll move. They need to know there'll be skyscrapers in Punjab. They need to know that there'll be like floating gaddiyan there maybe as well. They need to know that as in like every...
So flying cars are cut out. And still not.
I think we've foiled their plans.
Hanji, that's fair, Hanji. I'm flying cars.
Yeah, no,
Talk about flying cars.
we just need every single thing under the sun to be perfect before we move. And that's the problem with kind of engaging in this type of संघर्ष, is because you have to create that atmosphere. सारा जोर जिहड़ा सारा पा रहा साडे मोढियां ते है. We make of it what we make of it. Guru Sahib अंग संग्या, and it's like we should have no doubt in our minds that we गरीबी भी कट लूंगे, ਅਸੀਂ तशद्दुद भी कट लूंगे, पर ਅਸੀਂ गुलाम नहीं होना, and that should be the mindset.
They say the killer of revolution is comfort, and I think we have become comfortable in the way we live. By Sukhdeep Singh Ji, there's probably a few more questions, especially there was a few countries that were named there. Maybe we can expand on the situation global politically.
And if just on that specifically, then you mentioned countries like Russia and China, and then you spoke about Canada and America. So can you just explain that a bit more for the Sangha that I don't understand what you're saying there in terms of those different countries, and how this is much deeper than what we think it is? Because I think, again, the general Sikh is going to think, oh, Canada is now sticking up for Sikhs and X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah, and we can start there for sure. Canada's known this information for at least 7 years of how India has been operating, but they've actually known for probably about 40 years. They've expelled Indian diplomats from Canada in the 1980s during the Khalistan Sangharsh that was happening. And they were here under a diplomatic guise, but they're IB or agents of like Indian agencies that were functioning out of Indian consulates or their embassy. So Canada knows what India is. They make no doubt that this isn't a moral or ethical decision on behalf of Canada. This is opportunistic at the moment, is what it can be framed as. I'll give you an example. 2016-17, the National Intelligence Service for Canada, CSIS, found out that there was basically spying and networks being set up by India across like Canada in the Sikh community. They named one individual in particular, a guy named Amarjeet Rai. He was the consul general for the Vancouver region. They said that this guy was infiltrating into Sikh spaces. He was using visa giving visas as a weapon to kind of force Sikhs into kind of like, either working with him, for him, or providing information. He was trying to infiltrate gurdwaras and Sikh organizations. But one step further, what he was doing is that he was using middlemen in the Sikh community in order to fund certain campaigns of certain political candidates within Canadian elections that were sympathetic towards India. Now that's a gross violation of like the sovereignty of another country. That you have this person doing that. They had all this evidence. In 2017, end of 2017, they made this report to the Public Safety Ministry, which is now government. So they gave it to the government saying that as in like, we're about to break this nexus, that we need approval to move. They took it to the Prime Minister's office at the end of 2017. The response they got was that Mr. Trudeau is about to go to India in February 2018, a couple of months later, that we don't want to sour diplomatic relations with India. Hold this, don't do anything. Stand down. they stood down. Prime Minister Trudeau goes to 2018 to India. It's a friggin' jalouse across the board, is the best way to kind of put it. That he's pretty much basically there, left, right, and center. He basically bends the knee to India and signs security intelligence sharing agreements, primarily for Khalistan Sikh activists in Canada. That includes information sharing on what we're doing out here, what our activity is, social media monitoring and surveillance potentially of our homes. They also take information from India, which is more problematic for us out in the West, which is that they take verbatim what Indian propaganda is, what Indian newspapers are putting out, all these lists they put out, all these names they put out. And then all of a sudden what we saw was within the last 5 years, many of our Sikh activists are on no-fly lists. Many of them can't leave the country. Many of them can't even enter the United States, like myself. Many people's bank accounts were frozen. Many people are being surveilled. And it creates this bulge on this activism. So Canada, after 2018, when Mr. Trudeau came back, they completely quashed any investigation into what was happening with Amarjit Rai. And that guy was allowed to operate for several years thereafter. He laid a network of spies, agents. He infiltrated spaces. And they set the ground for this assassination almost like 7 years ago, that they would be able to carry operations like this out because Canada just turned a blind eye. So, when you said at the beginning, like, as in, like, people shouldn't think that Canada is just like out there for Sikhs. They did the right thing in the moment right now, but they had no choice. We should be clear on that as well. There's a lot of pressure and leverage the Panth has been putting on in the last 3 months. We have information. They know we have information. They have information. But where I think where kind of like, let's say, the tire met the road was really when America got involved. When meetings between, what information, Canada did come across some smoking guns. That we know, we just don't know exactly what those are. But they're doing a drip feed, as you can say, is like, they're saying they have communications records of the individual Pavan Kumar Rai that they kicked out of Canada, that who's being labeled as the intelligence head for RAW within Canada. That they have communication records. So I don't know if they tapped his phone. I don't know what they did, but they got some stuff. And that stuff is enough to kick that guy out, which initially when they made the statement, we were like, okay, so they made a statement, hollow words. When they kicked the individual out, it was like, okay, this is interesting, that now they're actually severing diplomatic ties at a level. And then they started releasing more information. The puppy, or like as in the pat on the back they've received from America now, even publicly, saying that they stand with Canada in this investigation into India, to me and many others here locally as well, is signals that there's a bigger kind of game at play. That, the United States is leveraging Canada. Canada is leveraging Sikhs in this fight. Mr. Trudeau has 20 plus Sikh Punjabi-based MPs. Right now, Trudeau Baba is the way, like, as in the Panth is moving in Canada. That, this guy... So he secured something as well in an election that might be coming up in a year or so, that, he's in a minority government. And he knows that as in the Sikh vote is active in at least 30 to 40 seats where we can flip seats. So he's playing his own game at the domestic level. At the international level, Australia, the US, others have come in support of Canada on this, basically, in our opinion, because they're countering what Russia is doing in Ukraine to limit Russia's power. India is the only state that is at a large level funding Russia by buying their oil in large amounts and allowing that type of trade to continue. So, for us, like, the geopolitics would say is that, like, the enemy of my enemy here is that, like, as in, like, so, like, they are now looking at how they can weaken Russia, maybe through China, through India. And I think there's where the problem lays for Sikhs, is that, like, how much do we want to be played in this moment? Like, what is our job? Our thing is, if they're fighting at a higher level than we're participating at, then what can we do at our level? Our level is the destruction of the intelligence sharing agreements that Canada has signed. We've got a lot of leverage right now. So Saadi Jadi Ranitiya has to be limited to what we can actually control right now. If we say that, hey, we want to fight at that China, Russia, India, US level, like, we're not there. Where we are, though, is we can secure the things around us right now. We can cancel these intelligence sharing agreements. We can force a public inquiry into India's ongoing interference in Canada for the last 40 years. What we really need to leverage is, for the average Canadian, average, like, white person out here, is really we need to leverage is that this is an undermining of Canadian sovereignty. Like Sikhs are just a part of the game here. It's your sovereignty, your elections, your free will that's being actually exploited. That your sovereignty as a country, then even the right wing Gora is on your side. That pretty much like the whole F India thing comes up, is that like as in like that India is now against Canada. India's against Sikhs. Majority of Canadians don't really care. It doesn't really influence or impact their day-to-day life. The Raniti here has to be that we show the angle that this is an undermining of Canada's sovereignty, which it absolutely is. We're not even like, this isn't even propaganda. They kicked your diplomat out of India. They're saying that, you know, you as Canada have been meddling in their affairs in an almost childish way. So I think that's the reality of like the geopolitics that we can see.
And just quickly, because we haven't touched on the UK there, when it comes to Rishi Sunak as well, the Prime Minister, and this new term, pro-Khalistani extremism. Any comments on that as well? How does the UK fit into this as well? Because you're saying America, Canada, and Australia are on one side. What about the UK?
I think we haven't heard much about them, probably for that exact reason. Like I would say, like with this guy, just, you know, Trudeau Baba is still kind of like sympathetic. But no, you're absolutely right. Like they're not really openly or overtly doing anything. They're not saying much. You know, they have that partnership with Modi, obviously through not only through Rishi, but even like past prime ministers as well. It's a very strong relationship that Britain and India have always maintained. The issue, I think, is that I don't expect much from the UK in its current leadership. I actually don't expect much from Canada or the US either. They're playing their game. Our job is to leverage that to our benefit. And none of them are ours. When we think that Justin Trudeau is ours, or, you know, Joe Biden is ours, or, well, not Rishi Sunak, but like as in like some other countries, prime minister or president is ours, or these countries themselves, like they're going to do what's morally and ethically correct. That completely goes against the idea of capitalism, and it completely goes against the idea of the nation state model. Like when America says American interests first, that is a slogan in the US, American interests first. That means that as in they'll do whatever it takes, they'll use anyone as collateral damage to ensure that their interests are met. To me, that means that, and the legacy of the United States in South America and all across the world, in South Asia and everywhere else, it proves that American interests first. So when we get into this kind of little pamburpusa or this confusion that these countries are acting on our behalf, we are very naive in that sense. That we pick up the chanda of a particular political party and we start, you know, marching behind them. And then when they do something that is against, like as in like what we would think is correct, we start referencing, you know, but they did this 5 years ago. Well, you can't expect everything from them. And we start making excuses for them. We become the excuse makers for the political party. The Panth is supposed to remain Nyara at the end of the day. We can't align ourselves fully with any political. And you know, there's interesting things the Panth has done in the past as well, where you leverage them, you pit them against one another, you never fully take anyone's side. You might have people that actually serve in their ranks as well. And to give you a small sakhi of like how that works though, is that like, you know, I'm sure many people know that as in like when Jaheda Darbara Singh was offered Nawabi in the mid 1700s, that the one to bring the Nawabi to him was by Sukhdeep Singh. And I was like, so in that moment, a Sikh was used in that moment. But what did the group Khalsa Panth do? One fellow like as in tankha deti, ke tu sada nahi hai, that you're not ours yet. Seva kar, tankha lagugi, peshi hogi. All that happened, and then it's like, okay, hon das ki hai. And then, you know, this Nawabi, you should take it, bachayunge, this, that, and the other one. But Jaheda Darbara saying, you know, different personality, obviously. Asi Nawabi kadshah lay, humko bachan Satguru Padshah. Like as in, we don't want Nawabi though. Asi ta Padshah hain. Like as in, like Nawabi na ki karna hai. Right? And as a symbolic gesture, when Nawab Kapoor Singh was put forward, and if you look at the hilarity of that moment though, it's like a stable boy. And Nawab Kapoor Singh was a young man that would just do Korean Liddi Seva. And he was in the Khalsa ranks, but it would be taking like somebody that's like a stable boy, a squire almost, and saying that your Nawabi is worth nothing, right? And then Panjandi Parandi Juttinula ke that Nawabi was taken. And it didn't really last, but the idea there is that like when we're subservient to any state, you can't exist properly. You won't exist as the Khalsa in a free will anymore. So when we're subservient or our primary allegiance is to Canada, the US, the UK, or any of these countries, it's problematic. I do want to add one more thing quickly here, because sometimes these things help. Nawab Kapoor Singh wrote a very small but very powerful article, The Theopolitical Status of the Golden Temple. And in that, he talked about the idea of double sovereignty and the Midi Pidi Siddhant. But the double sovereignty idea was really interesting because he said that a Sikh's Mudla Nata, or its primary allegiance, can only be, capital letters, only be with the Guru Granth and Guru Path. If it's anywhere else, they can't even be deemed a Sikh. This is very interesting for Sikhs to start to look into these types of things. The idea there is that if your allegiance is anywhere else, how can you fully 100% be faithful to the Guru Granth and Guru Panth? So his idea was, and if you look at that idea, there's a prop. I guess you could say there's a modern day example of that in June '84. That anybody that was a part of the Indian Army is that example. That was coming from a Sikh background. Those that went into Darbar Sahib with guns pointed towards Darbar Sahib, those that had pagga on their heads and jutti on their feet when they went in, those that thought that the Jujharus were the enemy and they were the saving grace, we gave them a title, Gadars, or traitors, right? Forever they became traitors to us, even though they looked like us. Then there was the other side of that coin that immediately ran away from their barracks, ran towards Darbar Sahib, went to go and defend Darbar Sahib, got killed along the way, spent years or decades of their lives in Jodhpur jail and other jails around the country. And we gave them a title and a kirdar as well, Dharmi Fauji. That as in like these are the Jinane apna dharm pashaniya in the moment. So in the moment is everything. Like as in like right now in the moment that we're in now is that we have to look at these nation states in a way as in like understanding that are they out there to do what's right? Or is it American interest first for all of them? And I would say it's the latter. And we have to be aware of that because in our month as well, we have many, many people that cozy up to them. And it's really easy to go to a couple of meetings a week, have some pizza at Mr. Singh's and go home at the end of the day. The Mr. Singh's pizza is good. And don't take me wrong. Like, it's good stuff. But like, if that's the extent of the activism, that's the problem. Is that like we've cozied up too close to the Labour Party or the Conservatives, or in Canada, the Liberals, the NDP, or the Conservatives, and we've become an extension of them. Therefore, we've violated that Murla Nata of Guru Granth and Guru Path when we start making excuses for them.
I think Bhai Gurpreet Singh Ji touched on this earlier, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast with yourself, which was touching more upon the personal side as well, which would be very important. I think something unique to this podcast as well. So if we could do that, you just going forward now, looking at Shaheed by Hardeep Singh Ji, and maybe just Hardeep, sorry, by Hardeep Singh Ji, and looking at their Shaheedi. And your personal relationship with them, just for the Sangha that listening, who were they and what were they involved in, and what was your relationship with them? And even just one last thing, because like many Sikhs listened to your speech as well at that time when Bhai Shaheedi happened. Can you just elaborate more on those questions, please?
Yeah, he was a lovely soul. At the end of the day, is the first word I'll use. Somebody asked me a question this week about have you said your goodbyes to your friend? And my answer was there is no goodbye in Sikhi. That doesn't like I go like as in like I'm sure of it, but I go I can't say goodbye in any which way right now. So I'll start with this story and then I'll get into your questions. The last time I met him was Friday, June 16th, in the evening around 7 p.m. was when we were saying our fateh to each other to walk away. We were standing actually just outside the Darbar at the top of the podium at Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara. As you can see, I remember this obviously vividly. And we were chatting and we were just talking about, he did a lot of seva and I'll get into that, but he's actually asking me, he's like, Chote Veer, he's like, he goes, Parvar, he goes, Bada Dukhi, he goes, Shaheed Singh, he goes, Paise Pejane. And he goes, "Thode je paise ikatthe karo." And I was just like, "How much do you need?" And he told me what he needed, and this, that, and the other. I was like, "Take it." I go, "Tusi pao, main pauna, do taan more bande fadte hain, aap kar dende hain." Bala nu puchhan di lord nahi. That we don't need to ask a lot of people. Janna khaga, let's just do it, and then we'll figure it out afterwards. And he's like, "Theek hai, aap karte hain." And then we're just chatting, and then he, as you guys probably know, that it's common in Punjab. Jehde do singh ya, jo do bande ya, like as in holding hands isn't a thing, like a big deal in Punjab. Like it's a sign of pyar, and it's a sign of like brotherhood at the end of the day. So I've known him for 15, 16 years. Anytime we would talk, he would hold my hand. And I, he'd always reach out and just grab my goturum, like my hand, and he would just hold it. And I got used to it too, so it's like a normal thing for me too. It's just it's different out here because we're not raised that way, or that's not culture out here. But that's what so he's holding my hand, he was talking to me, we're just laughing, and then we hugged like we always do, Bilad Fateh. And I started walking away, and I was at the podium, and he called out to me, and he's like, "Chote Veer," and he always called me Chote Veer, and he's like, "Chote Veer," and I turned around and looked at him, and he's like smiling at me, and he's like, "Je kuch ho gaya sambale." And I just said to him, just smiling, laughingly, I just did this, just come out my head, like as in like whatever kind of thing, like in my head, like as in and then Bilad Fateh one more time, and I left. That's the last time I saw him alive. The next time I saw him was when he was actually killed in his truck. And then when I reflect on that, I have to ask myself, what did he mean by Sambale? So, like, what am I supposed to sam? Like, what's the Panth supposed to sam? And the idea to me is that the type of banda he was, he meant like as in jira Panthik Sangarsh hai, almost sambo. Ke sambale, like as in ena hove ke piche bajwe, or it goes backwards. But I also feel like his family, he's got 2 young boys at home, he's got elderly parents at home. Always sambo sakde hai. But like as in like that idea of like sambale, like as in like it took me back to like when people know their death is coming. And I don't think anyone in our month has thought their death was coming the way he thought it was coming. Probably since the Jajaru period. That they knew as soon as they set foot outside their house that like as in koi pata nahi. And then he was operating for a whole year, that they were telling him that he was, like Canadian security agencies were telling him that, you got this threat, you got this threat, you got this threat. And he would just continue to do his work. And then, the day he actually was killed, 8 hours before that, there's a speech that's going around of him talking about his own death. That basically that they're zeroing in on him, that he doesn't have to think he has much time left. And if something does happen, that the Panth needs to move forward, that use it as inspiration. That this isn't the first time it's going to happen, it's not the last time it's going to happen. Like as in like Sangarsh diyan tiyariyan karo. So that's just a quick kind of like overview of like my personal relationship with him. Where he comes from a Sangarshi Parvar. A lot of people don't know he's from Pak Singhpura in Jalandhar area of Punjab. His home actually used to be a car or a safe house for Jajarus when they were in Punjab during the Sangarsh. Jajarus, like he met, he's very young at the time, but songs like Bhai Anok Singh Bhavan. He used to tell me often that he used to, sit in Bhai Anok Singh's lap while they would be, at their kait and stuff like that. There's other Singhs that are in Toronto that know this family really, really well. I met some Singhs there that were telling me after his death that his mother, Bhai Hardeep Singh's mother, saved their life several times. That odi duty lagi hundi sigi ke when there's aale dwale de pindan de vich, when they do a kera, the women were sometimes allowed to kind of move around, but the men were all kind of like kera band within their homes. And his mom would know that Nagali Pend de vich, like a raid pe gayi hai, that the police is there, and she would walk down the kaits amongst bands, and she had a signal for them, that waving her hand in a certain way, that would be a signal for them wherever they were hiding, if they were watching her, that they're coming, that go the other way, that start moving out of the tent. And one thing in particular in Toronto told me that at least on 3 occasions when they were staying in and around those areas, that is because of his mother's warning, that Sadi Jaan bach gayi, nahi ta is jana si. So his family life was this. So he's not coming out of it at a place that isn't like it just kind of fell on him, or he was doing this out of anger or anything like that. He grew up in this, and he was tortured very severely when he was a teenager in Punjab, like to the point where he had back and leg problems his whole life. He had a joke. If you ever seen us standing beside one another, I'm about 6'1". He was about 5'3", 5'4", which is almost a foot shorter than me. So if you ever saw us standing side by side, it was kind of like as in like, a little odd that he's such a man of such a small stature when it came to physical, but huge stature when it came to when it comes to seva. And I would joke with them, like as in, when we, sometimes you have to go in underneath the house and there's a crawl space there. So my house has a crawl space and he does plumbing work, and I had some work at my house. And it's only about 5.5 feet high, and I have to bend my head to walk around down there. It's kind of a funny story, and I just told him when he was going down there, I was like, "Aata teli ground hai, like tu dord pa jithe, like." And he's like that teacher nahi kari diya. He goes, "Mami tere arga hatta katta jwan ho." He goes, "The shabd nahi maar deta." That as in I wasn't allowed to grow because of all the torture I sustained. And he would say things like that. And then when I asked him about the torture, he was, beaten very badly with rods, iron rods and things like that. They separated his legs, as in almost ripping out his muscles in between, as in around his thighs and stuff like that. On his back, and they were rolling that roller that they roll on people's bodies. They would, break muscles and things like that. So he went through a large degree of that. He was linked to many, many different people. The Jatha of Singhs around, Bhai Jagtar Singh Tara especially, he was well connected with them. As in Punjab already before actually leaving Punjab. Bhai Gurpreet Singh Ji, Deepa Hirana, which is around that area of Doaba, as in where Hardeep used to live, that he was well connected with that family and that Shaheed Singh as well. So he had this in his blood when he came here. And then, when he came here in 1997, and we made it to Canada, he had left India and kind of ended up in Europe for a little while. Then he made his way out to Canada a couple of years later. So he had left pretty much at the end of 95, I think it was, post when Beanta's assassination happened. And he ended up in Europe, and then he ended up in Canada a couple of years later. And then he just visited his family here afterwards. But he's been active in Panthic work since then. But one thing I will say is Hardeep was a Nitanami Gorsik. He was a Vyasi. He morning to night he did seva at the Gurdwara. He didn't care of the financial costs that happened to him. Me and him have been connected 15, 17 years around there, as in every aspect of our lives, especially the Sangharsh side, which most people don't talk about. And there we were a support base for each other, because in there we would kind of sit and talk. As many people that know, and that is that you don't want to burden your families with a lot of that conversation. You don't want to take that stuff home to your wife, your kids. You don't want to kind of throw it on them either. There's very heavy things sometimes that you start talking about. And then there's this, I was saying before, ek Sikh doi sad sang. To me, he was my sangat. The biggest part of my sangat was him. And that's why, as in, there's frustration, there's anger inside me as well, a deep amount of it, which I'm working on. But on the flip side, there's an immense amount of pride as well. Imagine I spent 15, 17 years with this guy. When you're alive, and this is the thing that I think one of us should focus on. When we're alive and we see certain people doing certain things, "Emi galla kari jande hai, emi galla kari jande hai." A lot of people said that about Hardeep. "Emi galla mari janda hai, emi galla mari janda hai." And he never backed off. When the security agencies are telling you that you're at imminent threat of assassination, I don't know a lot of Bande that are going to be I'm not going to stop. I'm just going to keep doing what I do. I'm going to keep going to the Gurdwara. I'm going to spend more time at the Gurdwara. I'm going to talk more. I'm going to be out there more. He actually doubled down on his efforts. And, there's a story somebody, was, I told it, and, I'll give you an example of the type of person he was. I think is the most clear-cut example. He was offered a bulletproof jacket, that covers the head all the way down to the waist, by somebody that was really close to him. And he actually rejected it at first, and then that individual was like, "No, you have to wear it. It's something that you have to do. That you don't listen to anyone." They threw it in his truck, and he's like, "Okay, fine, I'll take it." The next day, that individual came back to the Gurdwara to talk to him, and they're just chatting. And then that individual went inside the Gurdwara. He was standing by their car. He took the bulletproof jacket and he threw it back in their car and he drove away. That individual got quite upset, called him, talked to him, and actually asked him that, I've been what did you do this for? And he's like, "Koi na," and then that person was upset. He's like, "Tu dagar Gurdwara hai, and then Gurdwara baith ke ab gal karte hain." He took the individual, sat down, started talking. He was like, "Gussa kaate karda?" And the person's like, "Oh, you don't listen. Like, as in, like, we're trying to help here." And then he's like, "Okay." He's like, "Samay de vich vishwas rakhna." Like, as in, do you believe in time? And then he's like, "Maran lakhaye mandal mein aaye." And he's like, so he goes, "Jeta." He goes, "I'll put your jacket on." He goes, "I'll sit in a bulletproof gatti." He goes, "Je mera sama aa gaya hai." He goes, "Mainu heart attack ho gayi, main utte mar jana." He goes, "Sama to sama hai." And he goes,
Right.
yeah, and he goes, "Mainu koi dar nahi hai कि he goes, हाँ, he goes, सब तो बढ़िया गल ये होगी." This is the one that really gives me goosebumps till today. He goes, "सब तो बढ़िया गल ये होगी." He goes, "ये रण मैदान दे विच," he goes, "निशान साहब दे थल्ले मेरी शहीदी होवे." And basically that's what happened. Like, he's living in the battlefield, and on Gurdwara Sahib, in the Gurdwara Sahib Parkarma, that's where he was killed. So he wasn't afraid of that, but he wasn't going to slow down his seva because there was a threat out against him. That's compromise. That to me is compromise. That if I have a threat against me, or you have one against you, Gurpreet Singh or Sukhdeep Singh, that we play into that to the point where ਅਸੀਂ ਸੇਵਾ ਆਪਣੀ ਥੋੜੀ ਕਰ ਲਈਏ ਜਾਂ ਬੰਦ ਕਰ ਦਈਏ. That to me, that's gadari with the panth. ਜਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਨਾ ਹੀ ਕਰੀਏ. Like, as in, you shouldn't be in these spaces then. Then leave these spaces to those like you that can actually handle that type of pressure. Because what ends up happening is that those that can't handle that pressure, they compromise the narrative. ਉਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਇਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ, they avoid even using the word Khalistan. Or they cozy up that, no, we have to just work with politicians. The fight is only with the pen these days. The fight is with whatever Guru Sahib ne sanu shastra ditte hai. That can be the pen, that can be your voice, that can be Rajniti, and like as in politics as well, and that can be shastras as well, jehde Guru Sahib ne saumpe hai. So limiting them in that way, that also to me is a way of limiting the Sangharsh. Because we ourselves at some point, sadiyan kamjoriyan hai, our weaknesses, and we're trying to cover those. Rather than just get out of the way then. Like, there's other better people out there that can actually come forward and lead this in Dutch then. So his life to me will be more of like a misal to me. It'll be an inspiration to me. And I think, people, they buy into this like Western kind of context as in like, oh, you need to say your goodbyes. And it's like, where does this stuff come from? Main ardas karti hai, like as in like Shaheed Singh. And, like I'll remember him in every ardas I do after that with all the other Shaheed Singh Singhaniya that we have in our month. It's like, why do I need to say goodbye and move on? Like, as in like, for me, it's an inspiration. I use his life and death to kind of guide me now, because now I actually have main do kadam kisi Shaheed Singh na ture, and then that should be an inspiration to me. Why would I want to remove that from my memory? I need it front and center of anything. And I think that's the difference between like our psychology or a way of our perspective of looking at the world, looking at life and death. Death for us is karabapsi, or return home. And it's not scary if you're ready for it. It's only scary jo tusi putte kam karne hain, sharaba peeni hai, like as in like, karam karne hain, then it should be scary because it's not going to be a good end at the end. But jinhone gussa
Dare so paap kamaavda hai. Mara says dare ohi darda ja paap kamaavda.
yeah. So
So
basically,
I'm just gonna. I think that was absolutely amazing to listen to, and just to kind of touch on some of the points that you made. I think in terms of us as Sikh, we have to be the complete package. There shouldn't be a Sikh out there that says the only way forward is the pen, the only way forward is politics, the only way forward is Shastra. As in, we need the multi-factor approach. And that, I think we all as Sikh believe that. And I think not everyone can do everything, but the person that can't do the other thing shouldn't badmouth it and saying, well, I think everyone has a part to play. Just within within a corporation, within a country, you've got, different sections, you've got different parts, and everyone should do whatever they can to forward, our fight for Khalistan, our fight for Azadi. I think going forward, I just wanted to, just to touch just a bit on the, within Sikhi, we look down upon Shahadat as being quite a, I think it could have negative connotations, especially a lot of people that don't understand what Shahadat is. They might look at Shahadat as being, oh no, he got killed. I mean, in terms of the perspective of what Shaheedi is, what does that mean to you, and what should it mean to every other Sikh? If someone is Shaheed in the Panth, shouldn't that be the biggest celebration that we should have? Could you expand on that?
Yeah, definitely. I can give my viewpoint, and I'm sure there's better ones out there, but I've always seen it as in like Shaheedi is like the ultimate gawahi, like as in testament or testimony. And I think that testimony in of itself is a very beautiful thing. So Bhai Jaswant Singh Khalra said that aside from Gurgaddi, that the biggest gift that the Guru can give a Sikh is Shaheedi. And that was actually very eye-opening for me as well to look at this whole thing in a very broader context. That why is it so important? And like what is it that? And then there's no fear of death in Shaheedi. There's an acceptance of like jada paana hai at the end of the day, starting from Guru Arjan Sahib. So when we celebrate Guru Arjan Sahib, and I think there's a when you're saying that sometimes it's seen as a negative connotation. I actually used to have talks with younger kids, especially on this idea, because they think we lost. Like there's some people that think that with death you lose, that they killed us though, like as in so we lost, and it's like no, but then you have to actually change the idea of what fateh is. Fateh isn't physical. Fateh is siddhantak for Sikh. In death we win. Like right now, I always say when I'm walking around, even some of the speeches I've done recently, it's like je assi bach gaye, je sanu char swas hor mar gaye, assi seva karte rahe, we win. Je assi shaheed ho gaye, we still win. Like as in like we can't lose. As long as jesse Guru di jada palla fadya hai, it's impossible for a Sikh to lose. But I think that negative connotation comes from the face of two things. One is death in and of itself, and the relationship that Sikhs have with death. Okay, like as in they don't see it as a karwa. See, a lot of younger people, they're afraid of death. And even older people, it just depends on where you are on your abhyas again. It's like at age, I shouldn't even say that. Age has nothing to do with it. It's more of an idea of like where you're at with your abhyas and learn and understanding of what Gurmat is. But once that fear is gone, then there's a chaw for Shaheedi that we used to see in Gursikhs all the time. Ki Shaheedi di ardas hundi sigi. Ki Maharaj sanu Shaheedi baksho. Like Bhai Moninder Singh, ro ke Shaheedi de jehdi ardas karni. And then jadon Maharaj ne deti, fir chaddi kala hogi, was his last words. And it's like that type of idea, I think, is a bit lost, and it needs to be brought back again. That there's a really positive connotation to what this is. And when I was saying at the beginning that the Gawai, this is one of the things I said in Hardeep's speech at his funeral when I gave it, was that it's what is it a Gawahi of? It's a testament, right? So when you give your life for Sikhi, what is the ultimate purpose of life? Like as if I go one step back, the purpose of life isn't necessarily to be happy; it's to be useful. It is a common quote that's out there. In Sikhi, you're only useful either to the Panth or to Sarvat at the end of the day. The Sarvat de pale de lai tusi seva kar rahe hain. ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਖਾਲਸੇ ਪੰਥ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹਾਜ਼ਰੀ ਭਰ ਕੇ you're doing that seva. So in that context, if the purpose is not to stay alive, it's like Sikhi saath navahi saas. Like as in like, you know, that idea that I was touching on before is to make sure that life goes by Sikhi ke saas wasa desam. That you don't actually give in to fear or doubt and backtrack or compromise. And if you can make it through life like that, then you've done good. But what people try to do is they try to preserve life. They want to live really long. They want to get to 80 or 100. They want to see their grandkids get married, right? They want to do all these things. And when that's your plan, if your plan is to live long, then you will do everything to preserve that life. You won't take risks that, you know, people in the Panth should be taking. You start living to live rather than living to serve. And if you're living to serve, then jehdi shaheediya is natural on that, because na thode ko chop hona hai, na thode ko koi like as in like change kam karan to tusi muh modna hai. And when you do change kam and you do the right thing, you're going to be challenged. And then sometimes you're challenged with jail, and sometimes you're challenged with torture, and sometimes you're challenged with death. But all jehdi gal hai, like as in shubh karma te kabu na daro, then you don't have that. Shubh karma karne hai, darna nahi na dolna hai. And those things are laid out. So I think there's where this whole idea goes back to, Gurpreet Singh, on your question, is that asi Gurmat te Gurbani to tutte hain. Odi samajh jehdi is not guiding us anymore. And sadi jehdi manmat has started guiding the preservation of life idea, versus that we need actually to live in service of Guru Granth and Guru Panth. And when I said before that it's a testimony for what? Shaheediya. In these moments, the testimony, I think, is a really big testimony. When Bhai Bota Singh and Bhai Garja Singh, 2 Sikhs, stood on the side of a road and they were, you know, taking tax, there's a declaration there that Khalsa jehda mita deta hai, the Khalsa has been finished. And 2 Sikhs standing on the side of a road was a declaration. right? It was a declaration and a testament to what? And it was like, when they Shaheedi happened in Panth Prakas, it says, "Sees lagaye charcha hoye, jab gaya janis khalsa soye." Yeah, sees lagaya charcha ho rahi hai, that they gave their heads, they gave their lives, and now the whole world is talking. And what are they talking about? That the Khalsa lives. Jab gaya jane Khalsa soye, the Khalsa hale jiunda hai. In Shaheedi is a testimony that the Khalsa hai jiunda hai. And that testimony to me is Avtar Singh Khanda, that's by Hardeep Singh Nijjar now. Like, those are testimonies to us, and it actually gives life to the next generation. If we don't have Shaheedi, like, as in, if you look at like what's happening, if we look at what our role models are right now, a role model could be, I don't know, Tanmanjeet Singh, or it could be Preet Kaur, or it could be Ajay Banga, that guy that's, whatever, head of the World Bank now. But are these people really role models for us? Then what happens to Bhai Jagtar Singh Hora? What happens to people like, Bagga and Shera? And what happens to like Jaggi right now? What happens to all these Singhs that are in jail right now? What happens to all the Shaheediyan? How do you compare corporate greed and capitalism and serving another nation and compare that with ultimate sacrifice, Tanuman Tan by Sikh Jajarus? You can't have both. Like, as in, like, if you have somebody in that realm, they can't exist as role models, because ultimately they're serving a different state. The highest level of role models we have is those that are sacrificing Tanuman and Tan. So I think, like, as in the answer to that is that, like, that whole idea of Shaheedi being a negative or a positive, the only way it's going to be a negative for people is that if they're following Manmat versus Gurmat, and they're stripped away from Gurbani. So my advice actually would be is to look at Shaheedi from a Sikh perspective, not a Western perspective, which teaches us to preserve life. Go to work every day, pay your taxes, grow old, retire, collect your pension, die. That is the model that the West has given us to live in. And the model the Guru gave is that Harek Ben Sangharsh Karna. The struggle is every day. It's within you, it's outside you. Do something bigger than you that the world will actually benefit from. And when you do those things, then you come into direct conflict with the state. You come into direct conflict with Jirwane or oppressors or tyrants that are out there. And then that brings risk into your life. So I think there's a clash of two worlds that we're seeing from the Western lens and then the Gurmat lens. And we should really be more focused on that Gurmat lens and coming back to that.
Absolutely. Just to kind of touch on a few points, then I'm going to invite Bhai Sukhdeep Singh for closing comments. If what you said was the youth nowadays might see it as, oh, we lost, we died. But who won the Battle of Chamkaur? Do people remember the millions that were up against the 40? The 40 are the ones that won. Winning is not about, and in terms of even the Shahadat staff up with Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji Maharaj and Guru Arjan Dev Ji Maharaj, all them, for us, they were all victories. They weren't like, oh, these were negative things. These were things for us to look forward and think, hang on a minute. And if you look at Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj, he asked for one thing, and the Ardas was, Maharaj says, Hey Rabbi, hey Sase, hey Karno, Meri Abhay, Benati Sunalija. What is that? Shastar son, Atahir and Pitar, Juj Maro to Sat Patija. Maharaj is asking for me to give Shahadat in the battlefield, fighting for Dharm. As in, for us, what could there be a bigger connotation to what Shaheedi is for us? If our own Guru Sahib is the one that's asking for that thing, then for us, it just shows that in Sikhi, we're not going out there and walking into roads looking for death, but the moment we give ourselves to Guru Sahib, we've already given our cease to Guru Sahib. Our body's already his. Who are we to? We're here to serve. And for us, Maharaj says, "Jis marne se jag dara, mere man anand." We're beyond death. We're akali. We're amar. That's what amrit is. We're beyond. And this is what we were, and this is why we were feared. We were feared because how do you fight against someone that isn't scared of dying? And I think it comes back down to kind of what Amritpal Singh used to say, we've become them domesticated lions. And I'm not saying we go out and we go, absolutely crazy, but I say we need to understand what Gurbani teaches us to be fearless, without any attachment, and we need to understand as Sikh, we've got a duty to the Panth. We've got a duty to ourselves, like we've this discussion has been around for us and our own Jivan. When we wake up for Amritullah in the morning, who is it benefiting? It's benefiting me. but what am I doing for the Qawm? What am I doing for the Panth? What am I giving back? If I've given 2 hours to my Amritullah today, how much time have I given to the Panth today as well? So I think it's going back. So by Sukhdeep Singh Ji, in terms of closing comments, future plans, what we asking?
Just before that, I've got one last question, then I'll close off with the conclusion. It just links to what Bhai said you were saying about challenges and personal challenges that these great Guru Sikhs have faced. And I know in the past you've spoken about this as well. If you don't mind just speaking about this in this podcast about even personal threats, things that you faced in your own Jeevan, if you wouldn't mind just talking about them as well, how you've handled that pressure. Because I think one thing, again, just thinking about I use this term, the average Sikh, who actually might want to do something, but there's that fear factor, right? And, if I do something, I might have to go to India again. If it's not about them individually, the moho we have with our families and their protection and so on. But Bhai Sabji, if you wouldn't mind just elaborating on that point of what struggles have you faced in your life, and maybe that could maybe just some advice you give to other Sikhs in the Sangat as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll actually start with my first struggles because I think this will be helpful for, I think, maybe a lot of people that are maybe newer. I grew up in a very small town with maybe 2,500 people lived there. And very, very small kind of like area, secluded, like 6 hours out of Vancouver area. I was the only kid with a case, me and my younger brother. And we got picked on and beaten up our whole lives, like up until we were like 12, 13 years old, especially. Like it was like a daily struggle. Our ramals would be ripped off, our case can would be ripped off. First day I wore at the start of the school was my first day of high school. I was 12 turning 13, and I tied a small dastard for the first time to go to high school. When I was sitting in like the cafeteria area, somebody that was like 4 or 5 years older than me, this quota ripped my dastard actually off the back of my head, and he actually ran to the washroom and he threw it in the toilet. And then I had to, a lot of people were laughing and this and the other as to what happened because small town, kind of the culture. So I went and, now you can imagine, like, as in, like, a 12, 13-year-old that happens to, and then half the school is watching, and then you have to get up and kind of, I had a hood, like jackets. I put the hood over my head. I went to the washroom. I found my dastard that was in the toilet. Then you take it out of there and, like, wash it in the washroom. I went home, and then those things continuously happened, like, as I was growing up. And the physical kind of like, they're getting beaten up a lot and there's too many people to fight. When I was like 14, 15, I grew quite a bit, let's just say, and I started wrestling and I started like working out and I started, like take bats to school, like as in like, but I want to know for a couple of years, like, and then some of my friends got bigger and we were all kind of like in one grade. There's 10, 12 of us. We would literally walk to school together. I think I'm leading to somewhere with this as well. We would walk to school together. We would leave school together. We had meeting points, no one alone. Even when we were moving around in the town, that everyone together, 10, 15, like Monday. And we had a little crew then, right? There was safety in that crew. There was belonging in that crew. Like, as in that became kind of like my place. But I read a lot about Sikhi. I read a lot about, like, as an itihas as I was growing up. But I wasn't into it at all. Like, I felt as a child that was growing up there, I felt Sikhi was the problem in my life. That if I didn't look like this, I wouldn't have all these problems. These gore wouldn't be like picking on me as much. And this is going to sound like, it might make me sound like an idiot, but like, as in like, I'll tell you, but it's the mind of a child, right? Like, I go think back now, the things I used to do. I used to do Mool Mantra. My mom used to tell me, Raat Mool Mantra karke kari ja until you just fall asleep, right? So I would do Mool Mantra at night. When I remember like a little kid, little gutti on my head, and like, as in like maybe like, 7, 8 years old, Mool Mantra karna. And my Mool Mantra ardas was that make me white when I wake up in the morning. And it's such a conflict of everything.
Like Michael Jackson.
Yeah, well, even worse, like, as in just somehow magically make me white, not through like some weird operations, but like, the mind of a child is that if I was white, I wouldn't have these problems, right? And I moved away from Sikhi when I was in my teenage years. I didn't cut my case though. This is really odd to me. I didn't cut my case at all, not even trim or anything like that. I didn't drink. I didn't do any drugs or anything like that. But I became kind of a leftist because naturally it's just kind of like, as in like, you pick up politics and you start looking at people like Che Guevara and all these so-called leftist heroes in the world, and you start aligning yourself to them, and a lot of their BS starts making sense after a while, and it shouldn't. Um, and then I don't know what happened when I came to Surrey. Minu ਪਹਿਲੀ ਵਾਰ ਇੱਥੇ ਸੰਗਤ ਮਿਲੀ in Surrey, and it was through Jathedar Trubandar Singh Babar's sons. I ran into them somewhere, and they gave me space. They gave me a home. I was out here to go to school. I was by myself. I could have easily gone in a different direction, but they gave me sangat for the first time. The first time I had belonging, like within a Sikh space. My first interaction with them, I'll tell you this, I used to have, like, those little, pataka jaga ke piche nu shut dena, like as in like a young jakke do these days, or back in those days at least they used to. That, you don't even tie a proper pug, you just have a little pataka on your head, but it just looks like a little do-rag or something. And I went to their house, and I remember I was talking to the older son, Jaswinder Singh, and I was just chatting with them. And then the younger son, Narinder Singh, came. And he came in and he saw me, and he's a big guy as well. And I'm a big guy, and he's standing there. And then he's like looking at me. And then Jaswinder Singh was like, "Oh, this is Moninder, Nindi, this and the other." And I said Fateh to him. And before he said Fateh, he said to me, he's like, "Where the F is your pug?" And I was like... And then he started laughing. He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "It does, yeah, it does." What I was saying, yeah. He goes, "Why are you wearing a pug?" And he's like, "Jaswinder, go get a pug." And then literally he tied a pug on me, sitting right there. I never took it off after that. That was actually when I started wearing a proper dasta. Then we got into Gurdwara, we got into camps, and we got into all this stuff. So there was a struggle there, like as a child with Sikhi. Once I got into it, I didn't really, I feel, look back. I took things very literally in life, that if fear was going to dictate what I was doing, that it wasn't going to bode well, like at the end of the day. I didn't want to be dictated by fear. I wanted to take risks in life. I always felt like you can't be a buggy if you just tattoo it on your back or on your arm. That's not what a buggy is at the end of the day. I was thinking, buggy ja badshah. It's like, what makes you buggy though? Like, well, what is it? Does the state want your head? Have they put out a hit on you? Do they want you arrested? Do you job somebody in the state side so much with your speaking, your writing? What do you do that makes you buggy? Rather than, hey, I'm a buggy, right? And I was like, I wanted to be a buggy. Like I said, if I'm going to be a buggy, I'm going to be a proper buggy then. Like as in, like, let them chase me, let them try to find me, let them try to corner me. Like as in, like, main hatanani. And I had that in my mind for a really long time. And I'm trying to, I always remind myself of that what am I doing that's actually buggy? Even in my conversations, that they shouldn't be compromised conversations where I'm trying to survive. Like that interview I did on Sky News, like I didn't like the way the woman was speaking to me, the one I was doing. And when she said that you're suggesting this and your allegations of this. So when I said that, as I'm not suggesting it, I'm saying it. It's like in that moment, I could have just been like, oh, she gave me an interview. Well, basically, F her station and F her interview. Like as in, like, at the end of the day, you asked me. I didn't ask you to come on your station. So you're going to treat me with respect at the end of the day. And if you're not going to treat me with respect, basically F off then. Like as in, I don't need this. So I think to me, even that's even buggy to a degree. That if she's me as a representative of a panth, it's not Moninder Singh that goes on, it's not Gurpreet Singh that goes on, or Sukhdeep Singh that goes on, or any other Sangha Kaur that goes on these stations. In that moment, we're representing the entire panth. So if some white woman sitting in some studio thinks she can speak to me that way, she's speaking to, de facto the entire panth that way in that moment, because I'm a representative of the panth there. So I feel like as in that bugginess has to stay within me. I think that what that's brought to me though has been I've had bank accounts frozen. I've been on no-fly lists to certain countries. I got banned from the US, entry there. Last time I was in the UK, I was detained by multiple agencies at Heathrow for about 14 hours, where they went up, down, and around of everything. They did let me into the country. I left quickly thereafter, though. That was in 2018, pre-COVID. I haven't been back since. I'm not sure if I can get in anymore. I'm guessing probably not, but we'll see. I'll make an attempt probably later this year or next year. And so those kinds of things happen. Then there was last year, where we felt that there's been some threats to our lives in the past as well. We work around those and see what we can do. Last year, national security from Canada came to 5 individuals in Surrey. Hardeep was one. I was another. where they told us that our lives are at imminent threat of assassination. So when national security comes, it's a foreign hand involved. It's not a localized police matter. It's not some like local group that's after you or something like that. If national security's arrived, that means there's a foreign hand, a foreign actor at play. So, that was actually more of a reality check, as in like, okay, we're doing something right. Like as in like kuch ta assi kar rahe hain, that jehda jirvana hai or the oppressor is being kind of like thrown off by it, that they want us dead. Now, how to deal with it? This is not to sound egotistical, but like personally, right now at the moment, I'm not overly phased. I feel like, as in like after Hardeep Singh's Shaheedi, it gave us some. He was my boy at the end of the day. He's my brother at the end of the day. But like it gave us a bit of time to reflect on like we're not actually doing any tiyari. We're just sitting ducks here, actually. They can pick us off one by one, no problem. We're making it super easy for them, actually. They know where we go, when we go. We advertise, hey, Bhai Moninder Singh will be speaking at this place from 2 to 4 p.m. And at 4:02, I'm going to get shot in the parking lot because we advertised. So we figured out that we're not actually doing enough to be smarter with certain leadership that we have. Those that are under threat, how do we protect them? And protect meaning as in like, what's our tiyari? If you go into a jang de vich jana hai, jang de vich as in like, if you go head on in a jang, you need change kapde, you need like armor and things like that. You need change hathiyar to be able to fight, and you need a changa koda in Purathan times to ride. So Hardeep didn't really have any of those things when this happened to him. And now I'm going to say like as in like we do. Like it would be very difficult for somebody like me to get hit the way Hardeep got hit in that moment. Doesn't mean they can't get you on the street or try to get you somewhere else. But we have more tiyari now in that moment. So the idea is not how do you deal with it? You deal with it with tiyari. Like as in like abhyas ho shuru kar lo, simran ho karo, gurbani padho. Like as in like that, make it even broader and bigger. So you don't dole at the end of the day in these moments where fear might seep in. And on the flip side, what is the physical response is that get better kapade, get better shastras, and get better kode. And then on do jinu on da like I said, je asi bach gaye tami sadi jatte hai, je mar gaye shaheed ho gaye tami sadi jatte hai. And I think when you look at your life that way, then it's okay, because the other thing that banda can do is that you'll just stare at a wall in a room all day wondering hona aage, and oh kadi zindagi hai. Like as in like, so this actually feels like we're walking in a battlefield. This actually feels like what we used to talk about with Sengs right now, that we look over our shoulders, we look around the corner, we have 2 guys over there, 2 over there, like as in like helping out. Everyone's in a state of tiyari. It feels like where you're in a Madan. And there's a different type of, like say, charti kala in this as well, that our people are starting to like look at the reality of it. So I think I've dealt it in that way. I've dealt with it at an atmak level, which I'm continuously dealing with Simran Abhyas, and as much Gurbani jinni mein to padhundi ho, main jana ja Guru Sahib jane, but onu ode wallo tiyar hona. And then on the other side, like as in physically, yeah, of course, meri bhi tiyari honi chahiye. Like on Madan de vich hai gaye, you can't just like rely on the sympathy of the dushman at the end of the day. Wo to chutkaun nu kar de. But I also feel, and I'm going to say this, and I'm probably going to regret saying it a little bit, that we can't rely on being reactive all the time. And it's something that Gurpreet Singh, you said earlier. Even in this Maidan, we have to be proactive to a degree. And we're doing some of that proactiveness now. But like what I want to say is, and I'll leave it in one short kind of comment here, is that the tiyari leads to a place that sometimes the shikar has to become the shikari. And we can never forget that. It's not enough that apna bacha kar hona hai. That's not what our sanghashas were about. That's not what the 80s and 90s was about. That wasn't what, Udham Singh was about. That wasn't what Sukha Singh, Matab Singh were about. Like, kadi jada ya, thoda shikar ho reha hai, and, sometimes you have to become the shikari to end what's happening, or at least give your panth a little bit more time to kind of like, reorganize. And I'll say this as well, that when these things happen, people are like, oh, somebody went into hiding, somebody went over there, this person. You know what? Jena te aundi hai, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਹੀ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ what they have to do. ਜਿਹੜੇ ਘਰ ਬੈਠੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਜਿੰਨੀਆਂ ਮਰਜ਼ੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਣ, ਉਹ ਮੈਦਾਨ 'ਚ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਪੈਰ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਹਲੇ. So when we say like as in like ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬੰਦੇ, they ਰੂਪ ਖੁਸ਼ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਆ, or they're not around, or where are they right now? The idea should be is like, as in like, ਅਸੀਂ ਤਿਆਰੀ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ. You know, I'm out and about, I'm speaking at Nagar Kirtans, I'm speaking on stages, I'm going to Gurdwara meetings even when I need to. We're there, we're around. Like, as in like, it's koi shak wali gal nahi. But I'd like to take people back to the 1700s when Singh Singhaniya went into the jungles. Like, ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਡਰ ਕੇ ਭੱਜ ਗਏ. The reality of their existence became, as a panth then and now as individuals, the reality of existence became they had to go and regroup in a different way. They had to change their raniti of how they were engaging with the Vedi. And that's the same thing for many of us right now. Our engagement has changed. And that's, in my opinion, good raniti at the end of the day. It doesn't mean that if you don't see me ever again, yeah, be like, like, I changed my name to Miguel and opened a taco stand in like Mexico. Then yeah, they okay, banda sega like as a rolla back gaya. But like as in when people are around, and I think that's where like guys like Hardeep as well, jede kende sege galla mari janda. Well, jera banda galla marta sega 3 months after his death accomplished. One shidan de khoon rangata leona isi. So he accomplished in his death in 3 months what the Panth in Canada couldn't accomplish in 40 years. That this foreign interference is real. India isn't this really awesome democracy. India is like as in this like, you know, really demonic type state. And they kill people and they do this, that, and the other. And to me, that's and we're already seeing that rang. So that's how I personally dealt with like my situations over the years, whether they were younger age or now. You know, it's been quite a long journey already because it's 25 saal ho gaya like doing seva in the Panth now. And kadi galtiyan bhi bahut hui hain, like I maafi mang here and I maafi mang from the stage. But I always say the same thing, galtiyan bhi ohi karde hain jehde kuch karte hain. Jehne kuch karna hi nahi, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਗਲਤੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ they haven't done anything. Right? I go, so ਗਲਤੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਅਰਦਾਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਸੋਝੀ ਬਖਸ਼ਣ, ਬਲ ਬਖਸ਼ਣ, like as in ਅੱਗੇ ਉਹ ਗਲਤੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਨਾ ਹੋਵੇ. So yeah, I think that's how I would sum it up.
I'm so sorry to do this. I know you're stretched for time, but just one more question. But please, you don't have to spend long on this. But we spoke a lot about the meaty side, you could say, but just a little bit on the meaty side, a bit about the side of Abhyas, Pragati, because again, you kind of angled this podcast at the basics of Sikhi Sangha, those that are a bit more, you know, don't know much about it. But for those that are a bit more heavily involved, can you just shed some light on the side of the Pragati and the spiritual side, please, as well? Why that is so important?
Yeah, I think I'll try to be kind of succinct on this, although this is a great topic in and of itself. Like probably you could do a couple hours on it. I go to like a one particular shabd actually, Kalkati Raja Kasai Taram Panka Kar Utraya, Kud Amabas Sachandarma Dise Nahi Ke Chadya, Hopal Vakuni Hoi, Adere Rahuna Koi, which a home Karta Kroi, Kahana Nakin Vidgat Hoi. Ejra Shabdya, it's been really near and dear to me for a long time because in it Maharaj says so much. And there's a question in there as well. And then Maharaj answers that question later on as well. So the idea is that Kalkati Raja Kasai, that Kaljog and the Kaljog being wielded as a kati or as a knife or a dagger. The Raja Jire, those in power, O Kasai ban gaye, like they're butchers, tyrants, oppressors. Like as in Taram Pankakar Udriya, Taram Jira, the righteousness in the world, or the righteous bande in the world have either gone silent, but they've flown away, they're nowhere to be found. Right? And the Shabda goes on like in that way to basically say that Adere Rahuna Koi, which a home kardo kroi, ke Ander Jeda or Kala Jeda Raat Paya, we can't even see anything. Like as in like we don't know the path anymore, we've lost the path. And then, you know that idea ke which a home kardo kroi, ke Tokh de which a home hankar ne hun tod ditta hai, te hun banda ro reha hai ke ki kara kithe jama. So you know, when we say like, what does Gurmat and Gurbani, what role does it play in this Sangarsh? That Maharaj in that one shabd has given us, this is your context. This is how you currently exist, because the whole world is existing in this Kaljug right now. Raja Kasai Banaya, world powers, what they're doing, states, what they're doing, oppression all across the world, Garibi and poverty, all that's the reality. And then what's the answer to it? Maharaj Kal Kirat Pargat Chanan Sansar. Gurmukh koi utre par. ਇੱਕੋ ਹੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਆ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੀਰਤਨ ਆ ਅਭਿਆਸ ਆ ਕਲਯੁਗ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਲਾਈਕ ਐਜ਼ ਇਨ ਦ ਬੈਟਲ ਫॉर ਕਲਯੁਗ ਇਜ਼ ਕਲ ਕੀਰਤ ਪ੍ਰਗਟ ਚਾਨਣ ਸੰਸਾਰ ਚਾਨਣ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੰਸਾਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲਾਈਟ will come into ਸੰਸਾਰ in the world through Gurbani, Gurmat Kirtan, through that like as an abhyas. So at a personal level or at a panthak level, it's utmost importance because it's not just like Gurpreet Singh was saying earlier, it's like, it's not personal. The abhyas that we do, it actually should carry into how we act and behave in Sangat and within our panth. So we become role models for each other at the end of the day. So I think that that's probably the easiest way to sum it up in a nutshell, is that like as in like the idea that they can be separated is impossible. Like as in like that PD side and the meaty side, that they're connected deeply with one another. Otherwise, they're so deeply connected that Maharaj, even for PD, the Mara Praditini, PD भी तेगा ही है. Like as in like मेरी पीढ़ी है जड़ियां दो तलवारां बद्दियां, एक मेरी दी, एक पीढ़ी दी, एक अजमत दी, एक राज दी, एक राखी करे वजीरी दी. Like as in that by Nathan Abdullah, like as in that idea, like Guru Hargobind Pacha and Miri Piri the Siddhant, when they started it, Miri as a physical, like as in like power in the world, was given as a sword, as a symbolic, like as a karpan or a tika. But Piri wasn't a mala either. Like Piri, you would think like that, but Piri was a tika as well. So the idea there is that even that righteous Pir at the end of the day, even they have to put their hand on the Mutava Karpan once in a while, right? But it'll be guided through Piri. Miri will be guided through Piri. So I think that's the biggest kind of idea there that we have to go back to.
Thank you so much. I'll stop with extra questions now. I'll come to the conclusion, G, but thank you so much for that. Just to finish off with then, for both of you actually, we'll start with Bhai Moninder Singh Ji, then Bhai Gurpreet Singh Ji. Just a final message to the Sikh Sangha, those that listen to this. What comes to your mind? What would be the thing that you'd like to leave everybody with in this podcast, G?
I would say like as in redefining the way you exist and the way you see the world through a Sikh nazariya or perspective. That everything you see around you, everything you say, everything you even think, bring it into a Sikh perspective. Rather than taking Western perspectives, Western education, like as in those types of things, like as in like I think they kind of cloud Sikh vision as it goes forward. So as in like they're there for a reason. Like Dunyavi padhai there, like you know, like I've got a master's and working on a doctorate maybe soon, and it's like that type of padhai is a hatiyar for us to use. It's a satan for us to use for the panth. Otherwise, we're naal thoda jana hai. Like as in if we think about like the ultimate goal is sade naal sade palle ban ke ki jana hai. Like seva jaogi, abhyas jaoga, simran jaoga. Like as in sangat te pangat jidi ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ, like ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਸ ਲੈ ਜਾਵਾਂਗੇ. But all this other stuff is just weaponized, like is a weapon for us. Like as in, so like Dunyavi Padhai, while I would say is like utmost importance, we can't lose the Sikh perspective on Dunyavi Padhai as well. That as in, it has to be through a Sikh lens. The other thing I would say tied to that is that once you establish that Sikh lens, then everything will change. The idea of victory and fateh will change. Like Guru Arjan Pacha to Guru Tegh Bahadur to Soti Sahibzade to Banda Singh Bahadur and the 700 that were shaheed with him, to the Shota Vada Kalukara. Like as in all the way through to Baba Deep Singh, Bhai Mani Singh, Bhai Taru Singh, Baba Gurpreet Singh, Garbakh Singh Shaheed. Even like as in Sham Singh Atariyan, like as in Bhai Udham Singh, going to like Bhai Fauja Singh Ji, and the Tera Singhs at Amritsar, Sant Charnail Singh Ji, and all the Shaheeds up to like Bhai Hardeep Singh now. Every single one was a victory. Every single stand was a victory. Like every single Shaheedi was a victory. Because we're never going to say that like as in like we were defeated in those moments, because we had a siddhantic or a moral ethical victory, and that's what we're going for in life. We're not going for necessarily the physical victory. Jitan harna na kam ta guru de hath hai. Sada ta kam hai sangharsh karna. Sangharsh de vich shaheedi bhi aaj we treat that as a win as well. So that's a different Sikh. My point is that's a nazariya issue. That's a perspective issue. A Sikh perspective says one thing, the world perspective might say another. So we have to go back into that Sikh perspective lens. And then the biggest thing I think in that perspective right now is this idea of justice. That, you know, you as Sikhs have to define what justice is to you. Like as in like justice, like to people means very different things. And if you look at Gurbani has a really interesting idea of justice. Like there's a shabd nao fakira pacha muraka pandit nao ante ka na parku eve kare goao ilt ka nao chaudhary koot khao nanak gurmukh janiye kal ka ehu nao. That like as in like if you look at justice in the world today, like you know, like the idea that a pandit or a very learned person, a murak is being established as that. Like as in like, and when you go through this entire show, the last thing there that Guru Sahib says is that Nanak Gurmukh Janiye Kal Ka Eho Nao, that that Gurmukh knows that Kaljug da Nyao is this, that justice is this in the world's eyes, that the world is betraying people that are like false on thrones, and all these bad things are happening, but this is what justice is being established as in the world. In that idea, then what is justice to us? Is justice jail sentences for who? Is justice going to be in the form of some reparations? 28 crore rupiah was supposedly going to be handed out to 1,550 parvars in Punjab that had their boys killed in extrajudicial murders. And that is a reparational justice at the end of the day in the world's eyes. Do we accept that as justice? Somebody goes to jail for 3 months, 6 months, a year, like Sajjan Kumar, and then they're released. Is that justice now? But if it's not justice, then what? You just sit there and you just keep banging on the same door over and over again, begging for it, when the Khalsa was made as the deliverer of justice. That you were actually supposed to deliver justice on the world. You were the ones that were supposed to actually guide this idea of justice in the world. That pura nyao kare Kartar, like Kartar ne pura nyao karna hai, that only the pure justice, the full justice is only done by Bhai Gurpreet Singh Ji ਜਦੋਂ ਬੰਦਾ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ, then ਉੱਥੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਪੂਰਾ ਨਿਆਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਹੋਣਾ ਹੈ. ਇੱਥੇ ਤਾਂ ਚਲੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੋਈ ਗੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਸੋਧ ਦੋਗੇ, ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਸੋਧ ਦੋਗੇ, like we'll find our way of justice as well. But at the end of the day, that pura justice, that pura nyao, comes from Akal Purkh. So I would say just bring that Sikh nazariya back. So if I wanted anyone to leave whatever they've heard here, everything I've tried to say, and I've probably made so many mistakes today, but everything I've tried to say is from a Sikh perspective, Sikh nazariya. And you hopefully can hear it through like the types of words I use and the types of examples we've used. So I think that is utmost importance, because if you don't have the Sikh nazariya and you're looking at Sikhi through a Western lens, it'll never make sense. And if it makes sense through a Western lens, then you've polluted it and compromised it.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Bhai Gurpreet Singh Ji. Yourself, maybe if you can focus more on the individual level, in terms of practical advice for those that are listening as well, please.
Aji, I mean, I can't really say anything would top what Bhai Moninder Singh said. I think that was absolutely pivotal in terms of us looking at the world and ourselves with the Sikh lens is very important. I mean, some working points. I think it's very important to understand that the Panth is very diverse. We're not going to get two Jathe that are the same. There's not two brothers in the same family that are the same, that have exactly the same Soj. And I think one point I would like my urgent and kind of, appeal to the Panth is that we start working together however we can, wherever we can. If your job is that, and your Soch is that my way forward is Bhakti, and all I want to do is Bhakti, then I wouldn't say to you, you're wrong. I'd say carry on that Bhakti as much as you can, but just do ardas for those people like Bhai Moninder Singh and others like Jathedar Jagatar Singh Hawara, who's been in jail for the last 30 years, and others that are still judging till today. And don't think, oh, ota sangharsh kar rahe hai, ota ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕੰਮ ਰੌਲਾ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਆ. No, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਲੱਤਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਖਿੱਚਣੀਆਂ. Don't pull them back, but do ardas for them. And if you're in the Madani Jang and you are actively, trying to do something for the Panth, then people like me sometimes are quick to judge, think, oh, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਤਾਂ ਮਾੜਾ ਫਰੀਆ, they don't care about what's going on in the Panth. They don't have Panthic dard. But for me to just appreciate, ਕੋਈ ਤਾਂ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਭਗਤੀ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ, ਕੋਈ ਤਾਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹਰਿਆਵਲੇ ਬੂਟੀਆਂ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਆ, ਉਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਭਗਤੀ ਕਰਕੇ ਹਰਿਆਵਲੀ ਆ. Like, I think what we need to start doing is allowing people, if they're doing something, giving them the space to do that without judging that, X, Y, and Z is doing this, they should be doing it like this. X, Y, Z is doing this, they should be doing that. So I think if every Sikh in the Panth just started to think, I'm doing what I'm doing, but what everyone else is doing is brilliant. We do ardas for their safalta, and I do ardas that they understand what I'm trying to do and ask for my safalta in their sangarsh or bhakti, whatever it is they're doing. If we start working collectively like that, in a country you don't get the finance minister saying to the education minister, you're doing wrong. You don't get the the army saying, oh no, the education should be taught like this. Everyone has it's basically in compartments. And I'm not saying that we should, focus totally just on being compartments, because as a Khalsa, you should be able to do everything. But people, as Maharaj has given certain people certain seva that they are focusing on. And I think if we can allow them people to do that seva and have that space and stay in that space without pulling their legs, like if Bhai Moninder Singh is talking and he's trying to do this, don't say, look, but do ardas for his chardi kala. And if people out there are saying, oh no, my way forward is to lobby or is to do this, is to do that, we just let them do. Like there's many organizations out there at the moment. And if you are a youth and you're listening to this and thinking, okay, how do I now take this energy forward? How do I do something with this? The first thing you could do, and it's such an easy thing to do, is just one job sahib a day extra for the Panth. Imagine if this podcast reaches 100,000 people, that's 100,000 job sahibs, and you can't underestimate the power of one job sahib. Forget 100,000 a day, and you will see the chardi kala in the Panth. That is the first step you could do today. Is after Rera Sahib every single evening, I will do an extra chopper sahib and I'll give that to the Panth. Do bhakti for the Panth. A second thing you could do is you can actively join whatever you're interested in. If it's history, there's plenty of people out there. There's the Khalistan Center that is doing work. There's Panth Punjab, that's putting academia out there. There's Saving Punjab, that's doing research into Punjab's issues. There's the World Sikh Parliament that's looking at lobbying and making an umbrella organization for many organizations. The World Sikh Organizers, another organization. There's so many organizations. There's, Sikh Press Association. There's Bars News that is doing a lot of work. There's so many organizations. Also, there's Basics of Sikhi, where you're listening to this podcast from right now. Wherever it is, however it is, do something for the Panth. It is your duty as Daswand to give a 10th of your earning. But that Daswand is not just a 10th of your earning, it's a 10th of your time. So actively look at yourself a day before you go to sleep and ask yourself, did I give a 10th of my day to the Panth? What did I do for the Panth today? And when we start asking ourselves these questions, I think all the other things that we, are confused upon, they'll start clicking into place themselves. If we all collectively put into the Panth together, whether that's bhakti and our time and our efforts, and we make that Panth strong, you will see the Panth flourish coming forward.
Right. Thank you so much, guys. Your inspiration to all the Sangat, your inspiration to myself as well. Thank you for giving us your valuable time at this moment. And we'll finish off there. Bhai Moninder Singh Ji, where can we find you if anyone wants to follow your work? I think Bhai Gurpreet Singh Ji gave all the shout outs anyway. But just one last time, where can we find you if you want to learn more about the work and the seva that you're doing?
Mainly right now through the Khalistan Center. Anything I might speak or write or give a charge anywhere or be on lives and things like that. That's mainly that. Physically,
so we were asking where we can find you just so that we can get a bit of intel out there.
I just want to go there right now. Physically, I show up when I want to, where I want to right now.
Thank you so much. Gurpreet Singh Ji, thank you for the jokes as well. Where can we find you? Saving Punjab?
I'm not telling you. I'm listening to Bhai Moninder Singh's advice. We need to be more strategic. Saving Punjab is where you can find us.
Thank you so much. And like we said earlier, Guru Kirpa, going forward, we should have more videos coming with Saving Punjab. Hopefully, a whole series in detail on the issues that are in Punjab and how we can tackle them going forward. Hopefully, Bhai Moninder Singh Ji, we can have you on the podcast channel more often in the future, Guru Saji Kirpa. And hopefully, we can have a darshan in the UK as well, Guru Saji Kirpa in the future as well. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you for your time. And we'll finish off there. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.